The first raindrop landed on Noah's notebook just as the final school bell echoed across the campus. Students rushed through the hallways, laughing as they escaped the unexpected storm, but Noah remained standing outside classroom 3B, staring at the empty seat beside his own. Ethan had left without saying a word. That had never happened before. Every afternoon for nearly 2 years they had walked home together, argued over music, shared snacks, and joked about teachers they secretly admired. Today there had been nothing. Not even a goodbye. Noah tightened his grip on his backpack and hurried through the crowded hallway hoping to catch him before he disappeared. He searched the library, the basketball court, the cafeteria, even the music room where Ethan usually escaped whenever the school became too loud, but every place was empty. The rain outside became heavier, and the students slowly disappeared one by one until the campus felt strangely silent. Finally Noah noticed a familiar figure standing beneath an old tree near the back gate. Ethan was completely soaked, making no effort to protect himself from the rain. Noah walked toward him and held out his umbrella. "You're going to get sick." Ethan didn't move. "Maybe." Noah frowned. "You've been avoiding me all day." Ethan looked down at the puddles forming around his shoes. "I'm just tired." "No," Noah replied quietly. "You're hiding from me." For a long moment neither of them spoke. The rain filled the silence with a steady rhythm that somehow made every heartbeat sound louder. Noah finally took a slow breath. "Did I do something wrong?" Ethan closed his eyes for a moment before answering. "You didn't." "Then why won't you even look at me?" Ethan wanted to explain everything, but every sentence that formed inside his mind disappeared before reaching his lips. How could he admit that one unexpected moment had changed the way he saw the person standing beside him? How could he confess that the friendship he treasured had quietly become something deeper, something that frightened him more every day? He wasn't afraid of his own feelings. He was afraid of losing the only person who had always stayed by his side. Noah stepped closer, lowering the umbrella so that both of them stood beneath it. "Whatever happened, we can talk about it." Ethan laughed softly, though there was no happiness in it. "Some things aren't that easy." Noah studied his face, searching for an answer hidden behind the silence. "You're my best friend. Don't shut me out." Ethan finally looked at him, and for the first time Noah saw genuine fear in his eyes. It wasn't anger. It wasn't disappointment. It was the fear of someone standing at the edge of a decision that could change everything. Ethan whispered, "What if telling you the truth means losing you forever?" Noah's expression softened. "You won't know unless you trust me." Before Ethan could answer, thunder echoed across the sky, forcing both of them to run toward the nearby bus stop. Neither of them noticed that although the rain had soaked their uniforms, it had also washed away the comfortable distance they had been hiding behind for far too long. The following morning the rain had disappeared, but the silence between Ethan and Noah remained. The classroom was as noisy as ever, yet neither of them spoke while arranging their books. Their classmates quickly noticed the unusual distance. Emma leaned across the aisle with a playful smile. "Did you two finally get tired of each other?" Noah forced a laugh. "Nothing happened." Ethan nodded without looking up. "We're fine." The answer sounded convincing to everyone except themselves. During the first lesson Ethan found it impossible to focus on the board. Every few seconds he caught Noah glancing in his direction before immediately looking away. It felt as though they were trapped inside a conversation neither of them knew how to begin. When lunch arrived Noah deliberately waited outside the classroom, hoping Ethan would walk beside him like always, but Ethan quietly left through the opposite door and disappeared into the library. Noah stood there for several seconds before following him. The library was almost empty except for the sound of pages turning and the gentle ticking of the old wall clock. Ethan sat alone near the back window pretending to read, though he had not turned a single page. Noah pulled out the chair opposite him. "Running away isn't going to solve anything." Ethan closed the book. "I wasn't running away." "Then why do you keep leaving before I can talk to you?" Ethan sighed. "Because every time I see you I start thinking too much." Noah frowned. "Thinking about what?" Ethan looked through the rain-stained window. "About whether some things are better left unsaid." Noah rested his arms on the table. "You're making this harder than it needs to be." Ethan smiled sadly. "Maybe." Before Noah could respond the school librarian reminded everyone to keep their voices down, forcing the conversation to end once again. That afternoon the principal announced a weekend volunteer program at a nearby botanical garden. Every student had to participate in pairs. Fate once again placed Ethan and Noah together. Neither objected. On Saturday morning they arrived early while the garden was still covered in soft morning mist. Their task was to restore an abandoned section filled with neglected flowers and broken wooden benches. For the first hour they worked in complete silence, pulling weeds and carrying heavy pots without exchanging more than a few words. Eventually Noah noticed a small orange flower growing through a crack in the stone pathway. He knelt beside it and smiled. Everything around it died, but it still found a way to bloom. Ethan looked at the flower before quietly replying, maybe it had no choice. Noah shook his head. No. I think it chose not to give up. Ethan found himself staring at the flower long after Noah had walked away. Somehow those simple words felt directed at him. As the afternoon sun broke through the clouds, the garden slowly came back to life. Visitors began arriving, smiling as they admired the restored paths and fresh flowers. An elderly gardener thanked the two boys before saying, "The strongest plants are never the ones protected from every storm. They're the ones that survive after the storm has already passed." Ethan lowered his eyes, quietly repeating those words in his mind. On the walk home they crossed an old bridge overlooking a calm river glowing with the colors of sunset. Noah stopped halfway across and leaned against the railing. "Can I ask you something?" Ethan nodded. "Do you trust me?" The question caught Ethan off guard. After several moments he answered honestly. "More than anyone." Noah smiled gently. "Then stop deciding how I'll feel before I even hear the truth." Ethan's heartbeat quickened. He wanted to say everything. He wanted to explain why he had been afraid, why every ordinary moment with Noah suddenly felt extraordinary, why the idea of graduation frightened him more than any exam. His lips parted, but the words refused to come. Instead he whispered, "I'm trying." Noah stepped closer, placing a reassuring hand on his shoulder. "Then I'll wait." Neither of them noticed the orange leaves drifting onto the river below, carried away by the gentle current toward a destination neither could see. For the first time in days Ethan felt that perhaps silence did not have to last forever. Somewhere deep inside he realized that fear became smaller whenever someone chose to stay beside you instead of walking away. As they reached the end of the bridge, Noah smiled and said, "Whatever happens next, promise me one thing." Ethan looked at him. "What?" Noah extended his hand. "Don't disappear." Ethan hesitated only for a second before taking it. "I promise." Neither of them knew that keeping that promise would soon become the hardest decision either of them had ever made. Monday arrived with clear skies, but the uneasy feeling Ethan had carried for days refused to disappear. The promise he had made on the bridge echoed in his mind every time he looked at Noah. "Don't disappear." It sounded simple, yet Ethan understood it meant much more than being physically present. It meant trusting someone enough to let them see the truth. During the morning assembly the principal announced that the school would host a 3-day academic camp before graduation. Students would work in teams, share cabins, and complete a series of challenges designed to test cooperation rather than individual ability. The announcement filled the hall with excitement, but Ethan felt a knot tighten in his stomach. 3 days together meant there would be no more excuses to avoid difficult conversations. Noah, on the other hand, looked genuinely excited. As the students returned to class, he caught up with Ethan in the hallway. "Looks like we'll finally have time to finish our conversation." Ethan managed a faint smile. "Maybe." Noah laughed softly. "You always say maybe." Ethan didn't answer. He wasn't afraid of the camp. He was afraid of himself. That afternoon the class was divided into teams for the first activity. Each team had to complete a problem-solving course that required absolute trust. One student would be blindfolded while another guided them through a maze using only their voice. Without hesitation Noah volunteered to guide Ethan. When the blindfold covered Ethan's eyes, the world disappeared into darkness. At first he hesitated to take a single step. "I'm right here," Noah said calmly. "Just listen to my voice." Ethan slowly moved forward. "One more step." He obeyed. "Turn a little to the left." Again he followed. Around them classmates cheered and laughed, but Ethan heard only Noah's voice. Every instruction was steady, patient, and reassuring. When the activity ended, their teacher smiled. Perfect teamwork. Ethan removed the blindfold and looked directly at Noah. For the first time he realized how much trust he had placed in him without thinking. That evening, while packing for the upcoming camp, Ethan's older sister noticed his unusually quiet mood. "You've been carrying that same expression for days," she said while folding laundry. "Something happened at school?" Ethan hesitated. "Have you ever been scared that telling someone the truth might make them leave?" She looked at him thoughtfully before answering. "If someone leaves because you were honest, they were never truly beside you. But if you never tell them the truth, you'll spend the rest of your life wondering what could have happened." Her words stayed with him long after the conversation ended. 2 days later the buses departed for the mountain retreat where the camp would take place. The air was cooler than in the city, carrying the scent of pine trees and damp earth. Their cabin overlooked a quiet lake surrounded by forests already beginning to turn gold with autumn. The first day passed quickly with hiking activities and team competitions. By evening everyone gathered around a campfire. One by one the students shared stories about the people who had changed their lives. Some spoke about family members. Others mentioned teachers or childhood friends. When it was Noah's turn, he stared into the flames before speaking quietly. The person who changed me probably doesn't even realize it. He taught me that silence doesn't always mean someone has nothing to say. Sometimes it means they're carrying more than they know how to explain. Ethan lowered his eyes. He knew those words were meant for him. Later that night, unable to sleep, Ethan stepped outside. The lake reflected thousands of stars, and the forest was almost completely silent. A few minutes later Noah joined him, carrying 2 cups of hot chocolate. "I thought you might be here," he said with a smile. They stood side by side looking across the water. After several minutes Noah finally spoke. "You know, I've stopped trying to guess what you're hiding." Ethan looked at him in surprise. Noah continued, "Whenever you're ready, you'll tell me. And if you're never ready, I'll still be here." Ethan felt something inside him begin to crack, not painfully, but like ice melting after a long winter. He took a slow breath. "Can I ask you something?" Noah nodded. "Anything." Ethan stared at the lake. "If someone changed, not on the outside, but inside, would you still see them the same way?" Noah answered without hesitation. "I'd see the same person. I'd just understand them better." Ethan closed his eyes. He had imagined countless responses over the past weeks: confusion, disappointment, silence, but never one so simple. Before he could find the courage to continue, voices from the cabin called everyone back inside. The moment slipped away once again. As they walked back together, Noah lightly bumped Ethan's shoulder. "You're smiling." Ethan looked away, embarrassed. "Am I?" Noah laughed. "Yeah. You finally are." Ethan couldn't remember the last time smiling had felt so natural. But deep inside he also knew something important. The next time the opportunity came, he wouldn't let fear interrupt him again. Whatever happened afterward. He wanted the next words he spoke to be completely honest. Little did he know that by the end of the camp, both of their lives would change in a way neither of them expected. The final morning of the camp arrived beneath a sky painted with pale shades of orange and gold. A thin layer of mist floated across the lake, hiding the distant mountains as if nature itself wanted to delay the ending of those peaceful days. Ethan woke before everyone else and quietly stepped outside. The wooden dock was still damp from the night's dew, and the gentle sound of water against the posts was the only thing breaking the silence. He stood there remembering every conversation that had led him to this moment. The fear that had controlled him for weeks no longer felt as heavy as before. It was still there, but it had become smaller than his desire to stop hiding. A few minutes later he heard footsteps behind him. He didn't need to turn around to know who it was. Noah walked beside him carrying 2 paper cups of coffee and handed one over without saying a word. They stood together watching the sunrise. After several quiet moments Noah smiled. "I had a feeling I'd find you here." Ethan accepted the cup and nodded. "I couldn't sleep." Noah looked toward the horizon. "Me neither." Neither of them rushed to speak. For the first time, the silence between them no longer felt uncomfortable. It felt peaceful. Eventually Ethan took a slow breath. "You asked me once why I kept avoiding you." Noah nodded. "I remember." Ethan looked down at the reflection of the sky in the water. "It wasn't because I was angry. It wasn't because of anything you did. I was trying to run away from myself." Noah listened without interrupting. Ethan continued, "Every day I told myself that if I ignored my feelings long enough, everything would go back to normal. I thought the easiest way to protect our friendship was to pretend nothing had changed. But the more I pretended, the more I pushed you away. I was so focused on not losing you that I almost became the reason I did." Noah remained silent for a moment before answering. "Do you know what hurt the most?" Ethan slowly shook his head. "Not your silence. It was believing that you thought you had to face everything alone. I wanted to help, but you never gave me the chance." Ethan closed his eyes. "I'm sorry." Noah smiled gently. "You've apologized enough." Ethan looked at him. "Then what should I say?" Noah laughed quietly. "Tell me the truth. That's all I've ever wanted." Ethan's heartbeat echoed in his ears. This time he didn't let fear stop him. "Somewhere along the way you stopped being just my best friend. Every ordinary day became important because you were part of it. When you smiled, my day became lighter. When you were upset, I couldn't stop thinking about it. That scared me because I thought those feelings would ruin everything we already had." Noah looked at him for several long seconds before speaking. "Do you know what I realized these past few weeks?" Ethan waited nervously. "I wasn't afraid of your answer. I was afraid of losing the person who always made my ordinary days feel different." Ethan searched Noah's face, trying to understand what he meant. Noah smiled again. "I don't have every answer today. I don't know exactly what the future looks like. But I know this much. You're important to me. More important than my fear. More important than my confusion. I don't want either of us to spend the rest of our lives wondering what would have happened if we had simply been honest. Ethan felt a weight lift from his chest that he had been carrying for longer than he realized. He smiled, and this time it wasn't forced. It was genuine. Noah laughed. There it is again. Ethan raised an eyebrow. What? That smile. They both laughed together, and for the first time in weeks it felt effortless. Later that afternoon the buses returned to the city. Life slowly settled back into its familiar routine. Classes resumed, assignments piled up, and graduation drew closer with every passing day. Their classmates noticed something had changed between them, but no one could quite explain it. They still studied together, still argued over music, still shared lunch, and still walked home beneath the same streets after school. The only difference was that neither of them hid behind silence anymore. They had learned that honesty did not guarantee an easy future, but it created a future where neither of them had to wonder about the truth. On the final day before graduation, the students gathered beneath the old maple tree where orange leaves had once fallen during the first rain of autumn. Noah looked up at the branches and smiled. Funny how everything started here. Ethan nodded. Back then I thought falling leaves meant endings. Noah shook his head. Maybe they mean something else. Like what? Noah watched another leaf drift gently to the ground before answering. Maybe every leaf that falls is simply making room for something new to grow. Ethan smiled as the wind carried another orange leaf between them. This time neither of them watched it fall with sadness. They watched it with hope, knowing that some seasons end only so another can begin, and whatever the future held, they would face it together, one honest conversation at a time.